Well, what do we do now? If you didn't watch last week's video, I replaced all 4 fuel injectors in our 2013 Mitsubishi Fuso FG in an effort to get it running. However, if you watched the video all the way to the end, you will have seen that even though I did get it to stumble and start, the next time I tried, it wouldn't run. At that point, I pretty much had to walk away. That's 16 months worth of work that looked like it fixed the problem and then looked like it didn't fix the problem. But after a little bit of thinking time, I decided to check and see if I had fuel pressure. I came back and I disconnected the injectors and blocked them off and cranked the engine over. With the Autel Scanner connected while I was cranking over, I was able to see that we're not in fact generating any fuel pressure. The question once again is why? Thanks for tuning in and welcome back to the shop of the little Fuso that wouldn't. Now I do have a couple of theories here, and one is that maybe I'd just been cranking for so long that the battery voltage was low enough that the computer said, I'm going to open the rail bypass because you don't need any fuel pressure. As far as I'm aware, there is a threshold voltage for where the computer will fire the injectors, and if we reach that threshold, maybe it's also saying dump all the fuel pressure. My theory on that is, well, if it's not going to fire the injectors, it doesn't need to build the fuel pressure, so just let it flow back to the tank. Is that what's happening? I have no idea, but I'm going to see if we can figure this out, because I don't really have any other choice. So with a full charge on the batteries, let's give it another go. So I'm going to cycle the key a couple of times, make sure we've got fuel through the whole system. I know I've got fuel in the tank. I've selected a couple of different pressures here. We're going to go to graph, and when I crank, we'll see if that red line and green line come together. I'm going to say there is absolutely no change in the fuel pressure that's being built, or at least not that the truck can understand. I know it also sounds a little strange when it's cranking over, and that's because injector number 2 isn't seated properly. I'll deal with that once I have fuel pressure. The question is, why do I not have fuel pressure? Since I had fuel pressure, nothing has changed here. I haven't changed any parts. I've previously proven that I had fuel at the top of the pump. I have proven that the pump is rotating and pumping, the pumping elements moving up and down. I've changed out the rail pressure sensor. I've changed out the rail pressure regulator. I've changed a couple of the smaller internal parts in here. And with all of that, previous to ordering my new injectors, I was able to generate fuel pressure when the injectors were not connected, but I was not able to generate it when the injectors were connected. That led me to believe this is an injector problem. That was further proven when I put the injectors in and it fired up. But what's the problem now? And to answer the question that's in your head, I have scanned and there are no codes showing, which again indicates this is a fuel-related issue, but it doesn't indicate that it's a component-related issue related to the fuel pressure. If any of these sensors were bad, there should be a code saying that the voltage is wrong or the resistance is wrong. There's dozens of codes for each of these components, and it's not showing anything. I also know that the electric lift pump is picking fuel up from the tank and supplying it to the rail and the pump, because I do have a baseline fuel pressure between 70 and 100 psi when the ignition is on. I also know that I'm getting fuel here at low pressure because when I first put these plugs in, this one wasn't tight and I was getting a lot of fuel coming out there. So if I know that the electric fuel pump is pushing fuel up this far, I know I've got fuel supply. If fuel is being supplied this far, I believe there's only 2 things that can stop it from going. This regulates the fuel going to the pumping element, and this regulates the fuel going back to the tank. Both of which have been replaced with new ones, so I don't think it's one, but maybe it is. Now, I can test the fuel metering unit by unplugging it. And I'm out of time right now. And we're back. So as I was saying, if I unplug the fuel metering unit,
it goes wide open, and that allows fuel to go to the pumping element of the pump. So if the fuel metering unit was not allowing fuel to flow, by unplugging it, it should have flow, and that makes no difference. The rail pressure regulator here has kind of a number of little plastic shields that go around it, and if we pop the plug off, we've got 2 pins that contact on the inside. I'm going to check resistance here, maybe it's open circuit, and then I'm going to see if I can pop some of this shielding off and see if there's something weird maybe going on with wire anywhere in there. But first, as I said, let's check for resistance. Again? Again! Seven-hour-old coffee. Clearly I'm not going to get a lot done today, but let's try and check that resistance. First, I'm going to zero the meter, make sure that we're pretty close to zero. So we got 0.3 ohms there, kind of as a baseline. Let's see what we get here. 3.2 ohms on the rail sensor. Now I happen to have an old one here. Let's check it and see what we get on this one. 3.3, so that's virtually the same. And I even happen to have another old one. Let's see what this one is. Pretty much all 3 of those are identical. So I don't think electrically this is broken. Mechanically it could be. I don't really have any way of knowing that. Now technically I can't confirm that it's good either. I can't find the resistance in the manual of what that's supposed to be. I'm just going off the fact that it's not open circuit and I have 3 that are reading the same, virtually the same. So it's probably not electrical on any of those. And I think that makes sense because if it was an electrical issue, like it was an open or a short inside, it should trigger a fault in the computer. Now, regardless of that, I do still want to see if we can pop this apart and see if there's any kind of wiring, potential wiring issue coming into this. So gently just gonna pop these off of here. That should take that piece off. Not seeing anything obvious here. There's no chafed wiring or anything. See if we can get one more off. I think that is just to get it to do a 180-degree bend without damaging it. So I'm not seeing anything obvious here. I'm not seeing anything loose in the back of the plug. So the next question would be, is there something with wiring inside of here? Now that plastic cover is not the easiest to take off, but I'll show you what I'm doing to get it apart. Each of these little spots here is a very small clip, and if you pop them apart, this half of the casing will come off. What I found is if you can sneak in from the back, if you can, of course I can't on this one, if you can sneak in from the back and push the outside, push this piece away, so like here I was doing this, pushing that out. Let's see if we can do it on this one here. It's a bit of a, you want to, you can see somebody's messed with this one. You want to be pushing this in, but it's really hard to do. It's a little easier if you can pull this out. So we just sneak it in the back there, pull out at the same time, and it pops off. My only reason for taking this cover off is just to have a quick look inside to see if there's any obvious wiring damage or anything like that. So I don't really need to get the whole thing off, because with the front off, I can peel it open and basically give a visual check. This is where that sensor comes in. There doesn't appear to be any damage there. And then it just kind of goes into the wire harness, which comes out here and then goes down to the ECM. Why am I checking the wiring? Well, I find it pretty suspicious that I was able to have fuel pressure one moment and then without touching anything, not have fuel pressure the next moment. If the fuel pressure regulator in the fuel rail has something where it's activated or deactivated when it should or shouldn't be, That's an easy way for, without anything mechanical changing, to very quickly be able to have or not have fuel pressure. Since there doesn't appear to be anything obvious under that cover, the next step is going to be to electrically chase the wires from this plug back to the plug on the ECU and make sure there's no issues there. Accessing the plugs on the back of the ECU is possible from the top, but it's also pretty straightforward. Just undo a couple bolts here and pop the whole assembly off. Which gave me another thought. Do you remember this video from way back? Is it possible that sometimes the SAM module is leaking voltage into the chassis, which is making the 0 volt reference voltage not 0? And if that's the case, if I take the ECU off the chassis, does the sensor voltage fall into the right range to allow it to create fuel pressure and start the engine? Super long shot, but worth a try. ECM is not touching the frame, just unbolted. We're getting ready to graph some pressure values. Let's give it a crank and see what happens. There goes that theory. Now, using the Autel, there are a couple of other things that I've just realized I can look at. What information can we get from the relay of the fuel pump? We know that's running, but the pressure regulating valve in the rail, that'd be this one that we're concerned about. The fuel metering unit, which is what provides fuel to the fuel high pressure pump, and then the signal going to that itself. We can see right now the fuel pump isn't running, that's correct, and these values are 0.2 is at the bottom of the range, 0.1 is at the bottom of the range, and 8 is, well, basically at the bottom of the range. So we're pretty much bottomed out. Ignition is on, but nothing active. I'm gonna cycle the key and see what happens. So now we can see the fuel pump has come on. The pressure regulating valve value has gone from 0.2 to 1. The fuel metering unit has gone from 0.1 to 0.6, and the signal has gone from 8 to 23. None of those have caused any error. So what's going to happen when I crank now? Let's see what happens. I didn't see much change in there. Let's see what happens if we graph those. Well, okay, so can't have the relay, that's fine. I know the value of the relay. So there's our 3 graphing values. And let's see if anything changes when we crank. So seeing a slight variation in the PWM signal of the fuel metering unit, but that is it. But if I look at those values, what I see is the PWM signal to the fuel inlet to the fuel pump is saying, I don't need a lot of fuel, but let's try changing it a little bit. That seems normal. It's within range, it's low. The truck would only be doing idle, so that number makes sense. The number for the pressure regulating valve in the rail was 1, and that's, let's call it halfway between 0 and 2. Seems logical. But does that mean that the pressure regulating valve is halfway open? Because if it's halfway open, I don't think it's going to build any fuel pressure. I don't know what that value is supposed to be, but it would make sense to me that if I don't have any fuel pressure and I'm trying to build fuel pressure, that value should be at one of the extremes. Either 0.2 is closed or 1.9 is closed. So why are we calling for 1? The other thing I don't know is if I unplug this, does it naturally go to open or closed? And how does that confuse things here? Let's give it a try. I know the fuel metering unit, when unplugged, is supposed to go to wide open. So at least with that, we know we should be getting fuel to the pumping element. Let's try unplugging the rail regulator and see if that makes a difference. Well, right away, the computer knows that I've unplugged the metering unit because it doesn't have a signal. So with both sensors unplugged and I've unchecked the status of fuel pump control unit relay, let's graph these and see what we get when we crank. Okay, so that jumped way up, and that is the pressure regulating valve in rail raw value. That's what it's trying to do. So it's trying to give it 1.6. Let's see if we go back to pressure values, do we now get fuel pressure when we crank? All right, those are the differences between them. Still no fuel pressure, so that's the fuel metering unit unplugged, as well as the pressure regulating valve in the top of the fuel rail. But I think all that really tells me is that we know that the fuel metering unit is wide open when it's unplugged. We don't know that the pressure regulator is closed hard when it's unplugged. I think the key that I need to dig into here and find out more is, what is the value of the pressure regulator supposed to be when the engine's cranking over? I would think it should be at an extreme to be fully closed. I don't think we're building enough pressure for that to say I should be halfway open. And is that what it's saying? If the range is 0.2 to 1.9, why are we seeing 1 when we don't have any fuel pressure? Now, this kind of information can be really hard to find, especially for Fuso. I've gone through the manual, but I can't find what this value should be when the engine's cranking over, or what this value should be if it's trying to create more fuel pressure. And then I had an idea. Maybe, just maybe, somebody else out there has the answer for me and doesn't know it. Do you have a Mitsubishi Fuso with a 4P10 and an Autel scanner? Maybe you know what this value should be. If you do, post it in the comments below. This information could be the key between me getting this truck running and, well, me taking a lot longer to get this truck running. And with that, I'm out of ideas, at least for today. I hope you enjoyed that video. If you did, make sure you hit the thumbs up button, hit subscribe if you haven't already, make sure you check the links in the video description, throw a comment down below if you've got an idea. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you next time.